Hey everybody, welcome to the Secret Wine Society Gardening Club. Looks like a lot of you guys were stuck at home, thought it was too hot. So Don Shumack and Leo Grass are here, master gardeners from Douglas County. And so for them, in this occasion, we're gonna open this 2016 Ronchi Barbaresco. That was a 98-point vintage. I want them to try it with us. It would have been open. You could have had it if you had been here, but you know what? We'll drink it together. So it's going to be a very casual table chat. I've got a lot of questions because my gardening skills are horrible. So yeah, so welcome guys. We really appreciate you coming.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you very much.
My name's Leo Grass, and I am a master gardener. And tonight was advertised as a talk on soils and fertilizers. I'm going to amend that just a little bit.
No pun intended.
And since it's been so hot and dry, we're going to kind of work in a little bit of watering techniques.
That's a great idea.
Now, just to break the ice, I brought these. I have many of these on my place. This is a branch from an Oregon white oak tree. And as far as I know, none of my company here understand what this is.
I can admit I don't know what that is.
There you go. Well,
what is that?
This is a gall that's caused by a gall wasp. A gall wasp is 3/16 of an inch long. And if you look at him and you were to pick him up and squeeze his abdomen and flatten it, that's what he looks like. Most of you will never see this because they are so small and tiny. And whenever I say the word wasp, people want to cringe because they think they're going to sting. But this guy is a very small little
Now
creature.
there's no wasp inside there right now, right?
There is no wasp inside here. When the wasp that was in here exits, he will chew his way through and make an exit hole. If you break this in two, it's got a lot of stuff. Now and that's what the wasp feeds on after he hatches from an egg into a larva. When he's complete his metamorphosis, then he exits through this.
Stuff like plant material?
Is it like fluffy
Yes.
stuff, kind of dry, poofy stuff? Here we
Oh, I
go.
see.
Uh-oh. Watch that glass.
Oh, yeah.
Get a
Okay.
close-up.
Yeah.
Spongy, huh?
Wow.
Is it spongy?
Yeah, kind
Now,
of.
I'm
That is so
assuming this may
interesting.
sound like a stupid, that's not edible, right?
Oh, it's hard.
It's
I thought it would
edible
be
to a
soft.
lot of wildlife. This year has been, I have more of these on, I own 5 acres
Wow.
of oak trees.
Check that out.
And
It
I
looks
own,
like foam plastic or
Yes,
It
something.
is, yeah, like styrofoam.
but it's actually a food source for raccoons, possums, squirrels, a lot of creatures live on these. And on my 5 acres, I've probably got
That's crazy.
thousands of these things. But what happens is the gall wasp stings the oak branch, and that causes the oak branch to form this defense mechanism, which is what this is, against him. They are not, now just to give you a little warning, I went online and I looked at gall wasp. I'd known what these things are for years, but I went online to see what they had to say. And just as a word of caution, things that you might find online, the first site that I pulled up talk about how to spray insecticide on your oak trees. And they say the reason they wanted to spray it was building this robs nutrition from the tree. Well, as you can see by this very vigorous growth,
Yeah.
they haven't robbed anything.
think it's
They just,
fine.
yeah, they just live there. So,
So how many would you see on a typical tree? You know, one here, one there. I mean, can it be covered with it? Or
oh,
could-
well, this was part of a group of 4 that was right next to my barbecue stand. So
Oh, nice. Okay.
Are they only on white oaks?
for the most part, now there are a few on the black oaks, but in my experience, most of them like the white oak trees. They also do occur on some other species in other parts of the country, but white oak seems to be their home of choice here.
Okay, so a question out of left field. What's the difference between a gall and a burl?
A burl is similar. A burl forms on a tree. Interesting point, Robert, because my daughter and her friend went kayaking this morning up to the lake up above, little pond they created up there. But anyway,
Ben Irving?
Ben Irving.
Mhm.
They were having problems with people stealing burls from trees. They would literally come with a chainsaw and saw them off. Now,
Yeah.
why do they do that?
They turn
Valuable.
balls. I have one.
That's right. People who deal in very ornamental grain wood products like gun stocks, pistol grips, candlesticks, those kinds of things love those burls because the
The wood grain.
wood grain is so
Okay, so let me interject a story. So when I lived in up towards Olympia, Washington, they have a very nice farmers market. And there was a guy that turned wooden bowls using burl, and I bought one. It was beautiful. So we just moved this past December, and I asked my wife, "Oh, where's that burl bowl?" She's like, "Oh, I think I donated it." I'm like, "Do you know how expensive that bowl is?" Because they look so awesome. I thought it would be pretty hard to mistake for a cheap bowl, but maybe it's still there. But what causes the burl? Is that like a virus?
It's another irritant in the tree. It's kind of like, it's the same principle as an oyster and a grain of sand. It's a disruption of the organism's traditional way of processing. So if this interrupts, I suppose you could compare it to a wart on us or something else, but it's a disruption in the normal flow of life that creates an anomaly.
Got it. All right. Well, that was interesting. So
Good.
it wasn't a dumb question after all. All right.
You can do it right.
And I'm only a glass in here. We're doing all right.
All right, well, let's keep going. Well, getting back to the reason we were supposed to be here tonight was to talk about soils and fertilizers. So I'd like to begin by a few basic principles about garden soil. If we look at garden soil, it's made of 5 components, basically. We have rock dust, and these rocks that formed as our planet formed, which was molten rock, and as that rock weathered, it ground up, the process of life ground up fine particles of rock.
So you're talking about the rock cycle.
Right, so we talk about, that's the sand. Sand or garden soil is made up of sand, silt, and clay to begin with. And those sand, silt, and clay particles are basically just ground up rock. That's what they are. And if we look at a sand particle and compare it to something that we're familiar with, a sand particle would be as big as a house.
Holy cow.
If we look at the silt particle, which is the in-between size, that would be the size of a Volkswagen. If we look at the very smallest clay particle, that would be about the size of a nickel
Wow.
So
That's a huge difference.
that gives you a perspective in comparison to sand. Now, then the other and probably most important part of garden soil is made up of organic matter, which is decomposed organic matter, organic being anything that once was a living thing. That can be grass clippings,
Leaves?
say again?
Leaves?
Leaves, sawdust, gopher bodies.
Yeah.
Yeah, anything that was once alive that is now dead and decomposed is organic matter, period. Now then, we can also add inorganic matter if we're trying to create the perfect garden soil. And usually we refer to those as loam, L-O-A-M. And if you go online and you look at soil structures, they give you a very nice little pyramid.
I was going to ask you about that pyramid. I've
Yeah.
seen it, and they describe the soils as different percentages and how close they are to this corner.
Exactly right.
It's like the food pyramid.
No,
No.
not exactly.
No, but pull it up, Chris, and you can show the camera.
Sand,
It's in
silt,
it.
and clay. And if you look at, there are ways of measuring along the lines of this pyramid. It will tell you what your garden soil is.
Now, is there a typical Douglas County garden soil?
Clay?
Probably.
Lots of clay.
No, and we have lots of clay, and people hate clay, but clay is actually an important component of soil. Because clay, being the finest particle in the soil mix, is also fine enough. First of all, if we look at the sand particle, it's basically a rock. It's round or square. If we look at the silt particle, it is smaller, but it's still that. If you look at the clay particle, it's flat. Now, being flat, it has the ability to really cuddle up nice and close to our plant roots and exchange ions, which are atomic structures that contain all of the things that we want our plant to have.
Wow.
So now, the last time you were here, you said something that struck me. So Leo was here, and I was asking you about some soil that I'd bought. I'm not going to mention from where. And you said, well, that's a manufactured soil.
Manufactured soil.
It takes millions of years to make soil, and that just like hit me like a lightning bolt.
Well, it's true. If you go out, if you buy a piece of ground and you till it up, or you let the gophers till it up for you and take a sample of that in and have it tested, they will tell you what your soil texture is. Soil texture is that percentage of sand, silt, and clay.
So I found our graphic here. That's what the pyramid looks like.
That's your homework, everybody.
Yeah.
And by the way, this is the last bottle of Barbaresco, sorry to say.
I remember this from agriculture class.
Yes.
We had to take a soil sample and put it in water and then do like a centrifuge, and you let it all separate out and measure it.
Mm-hmm.
You can do the same thing with a quart fruit jar.
Oh yeah.
And here's something that's real easy if anybody wants to do it. Get a quart fruit jar, fill it 3/4 of the way full of your soil. Don't put in the rocks, the dead gophers, the snakes, that kind of stuff. Just put it 3/4 full of soil. Now, do you know what Calgon, you remember the advertisements? Calgon.
We need more Calgon.
Makes the world go away. Yes.
right.
What it is, it's a detergent-like product that breaks down the cohesiveness of these different plant particles. So when you put in a little Calgon, and then you shake it up, and you let it set. In the first 30 minutes, all of the sand particles will gravitate toward the bottom and you'll be able to see them. In the next hour, most of the silt particles will settle out, and then you can do the next step in a couple of ways. You can either take your original volume of soil, subtract the sand particle and the silt particles, and what's left is clay, or you can let it set for about a week, and eventually the clay particles will settle out. So if you want to do your own soil structure test, that's a way of doing it. It's called the Calgon test, and it's been done for.
Well, now, so let's go back to these manufactured soils, and I like that term. It's the first time I've ever heard that term. And let's say you're doing some raised beds, and you go buy one of these soils. Are there ways to amend it to get it further along? I mean, I don't have millions of years.
Okay.
Fair enough.
And well, I'll give you an example. So we bought, 15 fruit trees. 2 of them are jujube trees, like the Chinese dates. And we have 2 peach trees and a bunch of other stuff. But with these, I put 1 jujube in the ground and 1 is in this manufactured soil. And I did fertilize, but it's not as dark green. It's not doing as well. Same thing with the peach tree. It's like they like the soil that I have. And
That's
I
right.
did the test where you put water in to make sure it's draining enough.
Right.
It's clay-ish, but there are earthworms everywhere. I mean, it's just rich soil. So is there a way, if you don't have, let's say if you're doing something on a balcony, what would you do to one of those soils to make it better?
Here's what I would do, and I'll relate a personal experience. Many years ago, I taught a class at the YMCA, and after I got done with the class, the lady who was in charge, they wanted to create a garden out in the play area, and she asked me what kind of soil she should put in, and I said, well, you can buy any one of the manufactured soils that's made by either Magnolia Farms or Douglas County Co-op. They both sell, and they're both good if you understand how to use them. And I said, you take 50% of your original garden soil, and you can get this. Now, they were in the YMCA, so she's going to have to come up with some topsoil from someplace else, but it has to be topsoil. And you want to look at it pretty hard to make sure it's not something that a contractor has scraped off the top just to flatten the place out.
Now, when you say topsoil, how far down is topsoil? I mean, what would be you talking 6 inches, 12 inches? How do they define topsoil? Aha, he's prepared.
Okay, these are
These guys are good. You guys are missing out. I'm so sorry.
So on that top, you've got the organic matter, and the organic matter is the decomposing vegetative matter and so on. Then horizon, and that's what they call these, horizon A is the topsoil. Now, you ask how deep your topsoil is. On my 5 acres, which slopes inward and then it drains down, if I dig up on one of the shoulders to put in a fence post, I get down to about 24 inches till I'm out of the topsoil range. So I have very nice topsoil on those shoulders. But if I get down towards the middle, which is lower, then I get about 6 inches into the ground. So beyond the topsoil, then comes the subsoil, which is still okay. It's not rich in nutrients, but it's still okay. And below that, you get the weathered rock, and below that, you get solid rock. So that's what, all you have to do is look up soil structures online, and they will give you that, and they'll tell you. And if you notice, the roots of these plants go down until they hit the weathered rock down here, and that's about as far as they're going to go. But in this area, there is still, it can sustain plant life, and that's what you're.
And so now remind me, if you have some of this manufactured soil, which I do,
Okay.
and let's say next year, you would recommend amending it with what percent of my topsoil?
50%. Half and
50%.
half.
I'm so glad these guys are
And, you know, they sell that stuff as garden soil, but it's actually a garden additive. And it does what additives are supposed to do. But it doesn't.
I didn't see that word anywhere on the sign. So,
Right,
but
right.
yeah, so, but we just started this year, so thank you for that.
Okay. You know, Steve Rehnquist, that used to be our extension agent, and we actually did a presentation at Spring in the Garden on that very topic. You cannot buy soil and plant in it and expect good results.
Now, see, that's something I did not know.
Takes time. Takes time. And all of those additives, the problem with most of them in our area, the most inexpensive additive they can find to build these things is wood. So you take
that makes sense.
you
in
take
our area.
wood products, bark, sawdust, da 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 da. And the trouble with it is the microorganisms that create soil. And here's a fact: if you take a tablespoon of good garden soil, somebody tell me how many microorganisms they think is in that.
Oh, I mean,
Robert, you're up.
I'd say 3 billion.
A billion.
I was thinking
Yeah,
a billion.
A billion, but there's a bunch of them.
It's a lot.
Anyway, so if you want to create a good garden soil, there's where you're beginning. And next thing we're going to talk about will be this time of year with drought and heat. I think everybody's probably concerned about watering their garden.
I have a
And-
question.